Right, I think we did it. I think we went live on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram all at the same time. It's pretty exciting. Good to be here. Excited to get this Ask Vanessa Everything, sorry, everything, Ask Vanessa Anything kicked off. It's going to be a great session, great questions coming up for you. And for this Ask Vanessa Anything session, we're going to be rolling through some powerful questions. Those of you who are familiar with this know that these questions come from folks who find me through school workshops, through their friends, through the Facebook group, through the podcast, etc. And really good to have real questions from real parents so that we can support you on what's actually going on in your day-to-day life. And we have with us live here Sterling, who's just joined us. Hey, Sterling, on Zoom, and others that will be joining on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. So let's just go right into it and get us started. And also, real quick announcement, we're recording lots of episodes for season 2 of the podcast. We're hoping to have launch in mid-September. So you have some really exciting things to look forward to, including information from sleep experts, some grief guides, and even neuropsych and educational psychoassessment experts who will help us walk through what we can do to support our kids and their potential learning differences and challenges. So lots of really good things coming up. We'll have more info on that coming out soon. If you're not yet a part of our, our community, make sure you're heading over to our website, www.vanessacallahan.com, and submit a contact form. Let us know that you'd like to be a part of our newsletter list, etc. If you're not yet, we're always happy to have you join us and be on this journey with us. All right, so we are resilient parents raising resilient children, and we're kicking off our session with a question from Sterling, who asks, my 6-year-old daughter has been having emotional outbursts, including hitting, throwing, and crying. How can I support her through the outbursts and help to minimize them? This is such a good question because I don't know about you, but what I've seen for most of our parents and clients and folks and even teachers and care providers is that when our kids are having big emotional outbursts, especially when it involves something that's physical, like some physical aggression, you mentioned hitting and throwing. For others, it's biting or destroying things. For others, it's hair pulling or shoving. There's a slamming doors, right? Those kinds of things. It can bring up a lot of emotion for us. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that however this is affecting our nervous system, that we've got a handle on that. And so it goes a little bit beyond just calm down, but really that is the essence of it. And the reason I say it goes beyond that is that we each have sort of different keys that unlock our calm and certain tools and strategies that are just going to work better for us. And also the same is true for our children. There are certain tools and strategies that will work better for each of our children. And even through the ages and stages, that can change. So one of the things I always encourage you to do is to kind of reframe it as this is out of control. We need to get it back into control, or this is bad behavior, right? And versus good behavior, or instead of being mean, you need to be nice. Instead of being out of control, you need to be perfectly calm. It's just setting up a little bit too much of like a binary, and it makes it so that it's difficult to reach the goal. Like, for example, we talk a lot about kids who are maybe having conflicts with their siblings and are not being very nice and are maybe being mean to each other and not solving their problems effectively. Well, even just reframing it to not solving problems effectively instead of they're crazy and they get into all these fights. We want to get on like a layer below that, and then a layer below that, and understanding what's happening. And also scaffolding for them. This is a principle that I know that Gianni, who's here, knows about, and my clients always hear about, which is that we start where they are, and then we slowly scooch them to our goal. So to ask a kid to go from being mean, 2 kids from being mean to each other to being nice to each other, that's a big leap. I mean, think of the last time that you had an impulse to be mean to someone. Maybe it was your kid because they were pushing you to that limit, or maybe it was someone who cut you off in traffic. Maybe it was somebody that's close to you in your workplace or your family, and you had this impulse to be mean, and then someone, imagine a voice coming in being like, now be nice. I don't know about you, but my reaction would be like, mind your own business at the very least. maybe something stronger. What we want to come back to is, hey, you want to be mean to them, but what's the message that really needs to get across here? Or what do you need in order to get yourself back to your baseline or put your lid back on, cool down, so that you can effectively communicate what you need or what you want out of this situation? And maybe sometimes what you need and want is just to let it go. Like that person cuts you off in traffic. Are you really going to chase them down in hot pursuit and yell at them and gesture at them? Is that really what you truly want to do with your time and energy? Maybe, but like, let's take a moment and actually take a beat and see and check. And maybe there's a scaffolding where, okay, I do want to hunk at them, but I'm going to let it go after that. I'm not going to actually chase them, or I'm going to complain and take some breaths, let it out. And then I'll move on. So some scaffolding there. So you've got a few ideas here. Finding the tool that helps you and your family, each of you, your go-tos for calming down. And there's a whole process that I love leading families through to discover your best calm down strategies as a family. If you'd like a sense of that, you can go to my website, www.thecalmempoweredparent.com, which has also all the information about the podcast. And at the top, there's a way to get a free guide on my six go-to calm down strategies, where each family member should find something on that list. Like, so far, so good. Everybody has found something on that list that has looked at that list that works for every family member. And it does help to go through the process like I lead my clients through, where you test out each one for a period of time, whether they like it right away or not, and you have it in the environment, which includes you. So, for example, you could for a week try out different breathing strategies, and then for another week try out different somatic strategies. Another week, maybe lightening it up and bring in some silliness and some goofiness to break up the tension. See what lands well with your kid. So, like, for example, I have a family in my year-long program who know that they know that humor and lightening up really works for their son, but their daughter really doesn't like it. Same thing is true, though, for their daughter. Their daughter really likes the breathing tools, things like the roller coaster breath, where you breathe in and out as you trace your fingers, and the smell the candle, or sorry, smell the flower, blow out the candle. She really likes those, but their son can't stand them. And imagine if they said, we have to use the breathing tools. Who would they be leaving out? Their son, right? Or they're like, oh, we have to always use humor. Who would they be leaving out? Their daughter. So knowing that it could be different for each family member is sometimes like the key that unlocks the kind of the treasure chest here of self-regulation tools and staying connected. So all of these pieces are important in the moment. Now, another thing I want to say, though, is that we also need to make sure that we are taking care of the things that surround these big episodes as much as possible to be proactive. Some of my favorite tools are going through the routines and making them as robust as possible, involving the kids as much as possible. That's something I teach in my year-long program, first month of the semester, twice a year, for a reason, and even give school workshops on this topic, because when you develop a robust routine that, like, it's robust because it runs even if you're not there, that they practically run themselves. And you use things like intrinsic motivation, like the kids sort of flexing their competence and their curiosity to sort of try out different iterations of the routine and be involved in that. That can smooth out a lot of these episodes to begin with. Like, imagine if you weren't giving as many reminders, or they weren't feeling interrupted, or they were naturally intrinsically motivated to do things. Oftentimes that settles down and can maybe take these episodes down to half as long, half as often, and half as intense. That's what we hope for. Another one is to get really clear on the expectations. And one of the best ways to do that is to make sure that you yourself are really clear. Like, why do the boundaries, limits, and rules exist? And how are we going to describe them in a way that actually inspires the kids to want to meet those expectations? That's a whole nother piece. And then last but not least, knowing how to be the best lid detector possible, where you can see, like, catching it even early when there are signs of maybe they're hungry, they're lonely, they're angry already, they're tired, but they haven't quite blown their lid yet. And a lot of parents who come to me say, you don't understand, I have a kid that's like 0 to 60, 0 to 100 in seconds. And I said, yes, that's probably true. They probably have like kind of what we would call like a quick temper, or I like to say a quick lid. It just pops off. And there are certain factors, signs, and patterns that we can identify, and even tells Like think of tells in a poker game that someone's bluffing. There are certain tells that the tension is starting to rise, that their lid is starting to pop, is the pressure, it's almost getting pressurized, and that their lid's going to pop soon. When you become more attuned to those tells and you also do all these proactive things, you can do better than half, right? You can go bring down the frequency, the intensity, and the duration of these episodes down to like a quarter, a fifth, or even a sixth, or even a tenth as frequent. Now, what I would say to Sterling and other folks who want to know about this is that you should take a really organized approach for at least 3 months. And I mean organized, right? Like you might even be in a program or working with a coach, or you sit down with your co-parent and you make a plan of the coping tools you're going to be trying, the routines you're going to be, cleaning up and improving, the expectations that you're going to get really clear on, and also the lid detecting piece that I mentioned. And you do that for at least 3 months. I mean, that's what the first 3 months of my program looks like, for example, before you decide that there's something clinically wrong with your child. Because what we want to see is we want data, right? We want to know, is this something like, is my child impacted and supported through intervention? And if we do see the frequency, the duration, and the intensity of these episodes reduce over time, then we have some data to work with and say, oh, we could probably continue rolling forward with this, maybe another 3 months, and then at 6 months, check in again, another 3 months, 9 months. And then by 12 months, by the year, that's why I do a year-long program, by the way, we should have a really good map of what each of the kids need around their emotions, around motivation, etc., the routines, expectations, even how they deal with conflicts, their love languages, the ways they like to express appreciation, like all these, their character strengths, all these pieces. We should have all these pieces together. And if at the end of that, or even like halfway through, we're not seeing much improvement, then we need to get clinically curious and say, is there something going on here that's beyond my child's control and beyond the environment's influence? And that might mean, getting them support like play therapy, right? Or other kind of assessments to see, like, maybe this is an occupational therapy thing, maybe there's a speech language thing, and then we can find out. But what I don't want you to do is kind of sprinkle in ideas here and there and continue being stressed. Please don't do that. There are plenty of paths to smoothing things out, and really consider the frequency, the duration, and the intensity of these episodes, and pay attention to whether you're making progress with what you're trying, and be open to trying new things or even getting support if if your own kind of homegrown interventions aren't making enough of an impact for you to feel really confident that your child has what they need around these episodes, and that you have what you need around these episodes. It's no easy task raising a child who has big emotions. I was a big emotion kid. I've had so many kids with big emotions that you could even consider like maybe highly sensitive, and or difficulty with self-regulation. Their EQ is really has a ways to go. It's a lot of work, and so rewarding though when you see a child make progress in this area. They have this sense of like self-mastery. They also are less upset about being upset over time. They're also more effective with their friendships because they're less likely to get upset and be physical at their friends. They end up doing better in school as they move into kindergarten, first grade, second grade, because they're able to pay attention and spend more energy instead of like coping with their dysregulation with the actual learning, because a dysregulated brain doesn't learn very well. So we want to pay attention to this, especially as they head into the more academic years. So Sterling, good on you for asking this question now at this age. Let me know if you need anything else in the chat. And also always feel free to reach out to me. And we can even look at getting you on my calendar for one of my complimentary sessions. More information at my website, at thecalmempoweredparent.com. You can check out the parent section and sign up for a breakthrough session there. That goes for anybody who hasn't met with me in the last 6 months. You can always, hop on my calendar and we can check in and see also if it's a good fit for us to potentially get you some organized, structured support, like one of my programs. So feel free to lean on that resource as well as the guide there. I'm going to move on to another question, but it's very related. This is from Jamuna. So Jamuna also has an emotional mastery question, wanting to know more about what to do to teach their 3-year-old how to be emotionally strong and create good social emotional skills. So basically, everything that I already shared for Sterling's question would apply here. But I'm just going to kind of kick it off. So Jamuna asks, how can I start teaching my 3-year-old to be emotionally strong and create good social emotional skills? One thing we underestimate with 3-year-olds is how much their language is developing and how powerful language can be in shaping the way that they perceive the world. And one of the most important things you can do is to model the language and behavior that you seek. This is especially true for 2 to 4 or 5-year-olds. Are highly impacted by their environment, and they are constantly absorbing what the people around them are doing and saying, and even sort of the tone and the feel behind their responses to situations. How many of you have heard a kid come home or, with a new phrase? It happened the other way around, where I was in the classroom, right, for 5 years as a preschool teacher, 10 years as an elementary teacher. I tell you, it was much more striking when it happened with the 3-year-olds. They come back with some phrase that was clearly not from their own making, and they would even apply it correctly. So one time I had this 3-year-old come back into the classroom, stub their toe or trip over something and go, "Gosh, darn it all." And it was really cute. But what it was also showing me was that they were their social learning was really, online. It was happening. And what I mean by social learning is that they were actually picking up, not only the phrasing, the tone, and sort of the humor of this phrase, but also the application. It was saved for when things would happen kind of accidentally, like stubbing your toe or dropping something and it breaks or it spills. And I had to ask the parents, said, has your child been around anybody, recently who does this? And they're like, oh, that's his grandpa all the way. And I was like, well, how long did he actually spend with his grandpa? He's like, oh, just the weekend. So in a matter of like 2, maybe 3 days, child had picked up a completely new phrase, applies it correctly, and of course entertains the people around him. But it was striking to me as an example of how sensitive kids are to their environment and how much they're absorbing constantly from us in what we're showing them. Now, we can tell a child, make sure you say this or make sure you say that. But if we show them, it can have 3 to 10 times more impact, the research shows. Because we are hardwired for social learning, meaning we learn from the people and interactions we witness and that how people treat us. And that is often why when we want strong social emotional skills, one of the most important things we can do is we can find natural opportunities to model behavior in front of the kids. So like, making sure that they're there when you greet people so they can learn things like greetings, right, and farewells. Making sure they're there when you approach somebody in a situation like in a store clerk or someone serving you food, your server, and you're asking for something, right? And you might say something, model for them how you ask and how you make eye contact, and you're friendly and you smile and you thank them, and you might even turn to them and say something about that interaction so that it starts to absorb. Like when people are doing a lot of work to support us in having a good meal, we treat them really well, right? Like things that reflect your values in the social arena and skills that they'll need in order to be a part of a contributing member of society that gets along with people well and has, good social skills. The other things you can model are things like forgiveness or apologizing, taking responsibility, right? Being generous, asking for help, right? Being willing to accept help, sticking up for yourself when you feel like someone is treating you unfairly. Those kinds of things, they learn so much from us. So just pay attention to that. And even sometimes I will stage situations in front of and tell stories to children is the second one under modeling. It's like modeling, stories, and then telling, if I were to rank them in order of impact. Although a lot of parents tell. We explain and tell and explain and tell, and that is one mode of teaching. But I tell you, stories and actually modeling will get just more bang for your buck, like more impact for your energy and your time. Okay, so giving you some ideas. And one last thing I want to say, when we mostly talked about social skills, is that all of this also makes sense for emotional skills. Naming your emotion, sensing where you feel it in your body, choosing a tool to help you self-regulate, and sharing that you use the tool and how it helped you. might look something like this. Oh no, no one's listening to me, and that's really frustrating. I'm starting to notice there's tension in my body. I mean, look at my hands. They're tight fists, and my shoulders are so tight, they're almost up to my ears. I think I need to do some tense and release and try again. And then you kind of go, right? And you'd like, it's a fast version. Slowly tense your muscles, release them, tense your muscles, release them. And then say, oh, I think I'm a little less tense. I feel like I'm less likely to yell or do something with my hands, right? Especially young kids, you want to describe what's happening in the body. I feel back in control of my hands again. I don't feel like grabbing anybody or anything like that, or taking something out of someone's hands. Now I'm going to try and find the words. You can say all of these things in front of a kid. I'm ready to find my words now. I'm so glad I have the tense and release tool. And then, surprise, surprise, a couple weeks later, just like, gosh darn it all, they're going, and they're tensing and releasing their little body, and they're saying, I'm ready now. And it happens, it can happen very organically. And like I've given advice to other folks before, though, don't expect the first thing you model or the first thing you show them or the first story you tell them, the first tool to be the one that works best for them. You're going to need to test out different ones. So make sure you're modeling a lot and showing and telling stories of a lot of different ones and see which ones land with your kids and feel like the best fit. Some kids are really going to love the somatic things like breathing and tense and release. Others are going to really like the self-talk and the lightening up and things like that are all, by the way, in my guide, which you can go to thecalmempoweredparent.com at the top and get a copy of your own guide of my 6 favorite calm down strategies. Of course, you'll have to walk yourself through it, which is a little different than maybe being in one of my programs where we walk through them as a group, but it's there for you as a place to get started. All right, ready for our next question. So we have one here live in the chat from Alex. Let's see. Okay. Hi, Alex. Glad you're here. So Alex shares, our first play date with a friend we met from camp. My daughter witnessed the friend screaming, yelling at her mom, and then it moved on to even hitting. I was very shocked and froze. How can I guide my daughter through this in a positive manner? Well, first, I would acknowledge that you were shocked and that you were surprised. And that one of the things that we do when we're shocked and surprised is that we can, fight, flight, right, or freeze. That you found that your nervous system was having a reaction where you froze. And saying that, when I witnessed that, I was so surprised and shocked that I found myself freezing, not knowing exactly what to do. And then you can even ask her, did you see that too? Did you see what happened? And you can ask her, did you notice anything happen for you where you felt like you wanted to freeze or flee or any surprise? And that way you're sort of normalizing, like, our nervous systems are like tuning forks. If there's a vibration near a tuning fork, it'll start to vibrate. If there's something, like we have these mirror neurons built in, and if there's something that's happening in our environment that has a certain kind of charge, whether it's, happy or sad or angry, right? Scared and all the other emotions, we'll pick up on that and our nervous system starts to mirror that automatically. So it was a really natural response that you froze. And I want you to sort of harness that truth, not only to give yourself some compassion for maybe not knowing what to say or do in that moment, but also helping your daughter make sense of your reaction and make sense of her own possible reaction. And maybe her reaction was more like, I want to get away from here, right? Or flee. Or maybe she wanted to move towards it and get involved and like be a part of sort of the fight of like separating them. I don't know, because I wasn't there, but get curious about that first. Now in the future, you can do it. You don't always have to do it after the moment. You can pull her aside and just say, I think they need a little space to work something out. How about you and I take a moment to check in with each other? And that's just like a really beautiful response to a lot of things that might happen. Like you might witness something else, like a car crash. You might see somebody fall down and get really hurt and there's blood. Like there's all kinds of triggers that can have events that can be triggers of a big response. And that's natural. Like we should be having a response. I would actually be more concerned if you didn't have a response of some kind, right, to what happened. And so you should be concerned if she also doesn't have a response. Like, you want to actually help her, get a sense of it, and tune into the fact that it's normal to have a response, and we can do something in the moment to take care of ourselves and each other. Once that baseline is set, you can also give her some language around what she needs next, right? And so, like, during the check-in, you can start with a little menu of options that might be related to, like, the fight, flight, and freeze, or back to, our core emotional tools around how you might, make sure that you're taking care of yourself before you get back involved in contact with people who are upset. And sometimes, that can happen quickly, where you just take a breath or two, and kind of try to make sense of what's happening. It looks like, your friend and her mom are in a conflict right now, and that your friend's, like, lid came off really easily, like language we use in my program. Your lid came off really easily, and that caused her to want to hit her mom and yell at her. And that's pretty intense, isn't it? That's a lot. Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like they're going to try and figure that out. Yeah. And you can ask her, what would you like to do? Or you can make a couple of options. You can say, would you like to take another few breaths, or should you want to walk over? Do you want me to walk over and check in on them, and, you stay here? Or would you like to come over with me and just see if anything has changed since we gave them some space? These are all really great life skills. Like, you would love for her to be on the yard. Two kids are having a conflict, and she steps away, checks in with herself, takes care of herself, and then considers her options from there, that she could, continue to take care of herself. She can get some help and have someone else check in with the situation to see if it's safe to return, or she herself can go in and check it out and see if it's safe to return, possibly with a buddy, right? Like, have a friend come and say, will you come with me to go see if the game is, things are calmer. All of these things are within the wheelhouse of a growing child. And oftentimes we, again, need to scaffold for them, giving them sort of choices and sort of a logical step through. And then, of course, it's not a bad idea to build some community around what happened with this parent in a way that's shame-free, in a way that's very compassionate, but also takes care of you and takes care of your daughter. And sometimes that means canceling a play date, and it's okay. It's not a representation of, we don't think this is ever going to work. It's just that, like, seems like maybe this isn't the best time for us to be trying this right now, today. And I'll be in touch this evening about rescheduling. And I think what might be best is for me and my daughter to go do something else right now. And we'll find another time that's better. And it just gives so much space for grace. And then also opens a line of communication for you and that parent to, like, maybe make sense of what happened. And, like, when I say community, I mean some people who commune, who connect, who stay connected, even when events like this happen. And you might discover in your conversation with the parent that you do have different ideas of what behavior is acceptable, what your sort of expectations and ground rules are. And that can be really informative, right? Give you some data about how compatible your two families really are. I'm going to pause for a second. Just get a little drink of water. Okay, I think that helped. So when you're looking at building that community and having that moment of check-in with another parent, allow yourself to, really take it in and see, if does this work for me? Like, does the way that this parent is communicating work for me? Do I think it would work for my child? Because in a lot of ways, when we're building community with other families, we are looking for good fit. And we want to give people the benefit of the doubt, but we also want to pay attention to whether or not we feel like it's compatible for this level of community. Like, maybe we're meant to see each other at school functions, but not necessarily arrange play dates where your child is left alone with this family unit, or their child is left alone with your family unit at this time. And you can revisit it. And also, if you see struggling parents, tell them about my podcast. You always can. And just say, hey, this resource or this episode was really helpful for me. Maybe it'll help you too. She has a really shame-free approach that, I find refreshing, et cetera, whatever it is that you like about the way that we sort of approach things at Raising Our Resilience. that might feel more empowering and less disempowering. So I hope that helps. Alex, let me know if there are any follow-up questions in the chat. Okay. We'd love to know if there's something or anything that stood out to you in particular that you want to try next. It's always great to have some back and forth interaction here. Same with you, Sterling, who listened to my response to your question. Any follow-up question or takeaway is always welcome since you're here live. Way to make it here live, by the way. All right. So I have another one that's connected to Alex's kind of spontaneous question, which I love when that happens. I'm going to kick it off here. You're welcome, Sterling. Okay. So this comes from Julie. Julie asks, my 5-year-old has ADHD. What can I do to be more prepared and better manage his impulsive behavior while also helping my older children understand that antagonizing him makes his behaviors worse? I'm going to say that last part again, that antagonizing him makes his behaviors worse. Oh, Julie, so yeah, you have multiple kids. Your youngest one, it sounds like, or at least your 5-year-old has had a diagnosis, and you're helping your older kids wrap their heads around what that really means. It is so tempting for older kids to antagonize their younger siblings because the reaction can be really entertaining, and they do have sort of some power in the situation to like really get them going. And unfortunately, part of human nature is to seek entertainment and to experiment and try and figure out things like attention and power and influence. So depending on how much older your older children are is how with the level of sophistication you can start to talk to them about attention, power, and influence, and also responsibility and accountability. So one of the things that I emphasize when I coach my clients on conflicts, problem solving, repair, etc., is that we often make the mistake of allowing kids and even ourselves to get away with apologizing for intent and not ever addressing the impact. So one thing, here's what an apology sounds like when it's only for the intent. And this is part of what you're going to need to address likely with the older kids, so they start to close the loop on a learning cycle here, so that when they repair for the antagonizing, they actually start to internalize and understand that they're having a real impact and that their behavior needs to change, because that's oftentimes where the learning opportunity is. So how it could sound like when they're only acknowledging intent would be something like, well, I didn't know that it would make him cry, or I didn't mean to, set him off, or I didn't mean to start a big thing. It wasn't my intention. They might be that sophisticated. It wasn't my intention to hurt his feelings or to make fun of him. Right. Sorry. It's like 10% of an apology. Like I've recently heard Brene Brown say something like, an apology is a good start, but how you're going to make it up to me is what I'm really interested in when it comes to repair. So we do need to shift from just intent to impact, is how I would describe it, right? Because if we only address intent and we don't address the impact, that becomes an injury. And if you have multiple injuries, that becomes a trauma, right? Especially if they aren't dealt with in a way that helps the person who is being, impacted make sense of why this is happening to them. Then they can go into a lot of trauma response, which is absolutely indicated in ADHD training, treatment. Like we don't want our ADHD kids to be traumatized. It's going to make their self-regulation even more challenging. We don't want any kid to be traumatized, but we especially don't want our kids who already struggle with self-regulation to be experiencing that. So coming back to intent and impact, and why impact is what is actually the focus here and making up for it. So how that might sound is, oh no, I didn't mean to make my brother cry and hurt his feelings. That wasn't my intent. And I now see that he's really upset. And I can see that because he's crying and now he doesn't want to play the game, and that's really sad. And I don't think it's fair for me to continue playing until I've helped him cheer up and made it up to him. I'm going to go out of my way now to make sure he knows that I'm going to try my best to not tease him anymore like that, and to, maybe even play the game he wants to play first. And, for a good 20 minutes before I go back to what I was doing. Now that is concrete. That's something that the young one, the 5-year-old, can really feel. And it also means that your older kids have had to hold themselves to a different standard of repair, which helps contribute to them learning and internalizing that the mild flash of entertainment that they get out of it is not worth it to then feel bad and then have to go through a lengthy repair process in order to make up for it. Like, they're going to start weighing that out. And you can even refer back to it. Like, when if they start antagonizing him again, you'll have this shorthand to be able to intervene. You'll just say something like, are we going down that road again where you're going to need to make it up to him and do a lengthy apology? And you can also attach a consequence to it and lose your screen time for the rest of the day. Or do you think you can rein it in and make a different choice right now? Or would you like me to do you need my help in making a different choice right now? Right. So you can start to cut it off earlier, nip it in the bud, and then you'll see your child weigh that out. I've done this in the classroom so many times with my 6 to 9-year-olds. And then later when I was homeschooling some kids, some tweens and teens, and also with my own stepchildren who I raised from 10 and 13, right, for a whole decade into 20 and 23, they will weigh it out. They'll weigh it out. And if you make the thing that they have to do, if they cross that line, something that they really don't want to have to do, I mean, like, I made it sound pretty unappealing, right? Even though they're really good life skills. But like, once you've established that that's the norm, like, if you continue antagonizing your brother to the point where he is so impacted, he's crying and like whimpering and taking himself out of the room and finding me, then something happens after that. And also for the 5-year-old to witness that you stand up for him and you insist on full repair before anything else can happen. Yeah, no, there's no more hang out. Your friends need to go home if you can't pull it together. Right. Oh yeah, no, this game is going to get put away and we're going to have, like, basically we're going to be grounded until you get it together and find a way to make it up to your brother. Like, you take it very seriously, and you do it in a way that's instructive, that's supportive, that's structured, not necessarily punitive, because you might just get a lot of rebellion and not get very far. This isn't always easy. If you need support with this, Julie, let me know. There are ways that you can get in touch with me and even get a free breakthrough session, free strategy session on my website at www.thecalmempoweredparent.com. Also some more resources there for you. So check them out, Julie. Really glad you had this question. Last but not least, though, I want to also say you have to share the science behind ADHD with the older kids. And this might mean that you're starting to bring in language for your 5-year-old to advocate for himself too. And the reason that this is important when you have older sibs of a child with a diagnosis is that you're going to be the first person let me rephrase that. You want to be the first person to curate the conversation around his diagnosis, including at school, but especially at home. That way he integrates this information about how being a person with ADHD and with special challenges and special strengths from you and from a reliable source, like, maybe a pediatrician or therapist or a program that you're a part of, and you really curate that for him. And the reason I say this is because what you don't want is it to come to him from different sources that have conflicting information, because that can really impact his self-esteem and his understand and really, confuse him in terms of his understanding and comprehension of what it means. And so just even breaking down the variability in impulsivity and self-control, right? Those are related, and ability to focus and organize and kind of organize, right? All those executive functioning pieces, you're going to want to explain to the older kids that it is what can be wildly variable. And so you'll notice sometimes your 5-year-old brother can control his impulses. Other times he really struggles with that. You'll see your 5-year-old brother being able to control his body and his movements, and other times you'll see he won't be able to. very easily at all. He'll need help with that. You'll see me working with him to get things done some days that he can usually do himself because his ability to focus is just really low that day, and his executive function, his ability to make decisions and stay focused, stay on task and organize things sequentially beyond 1 or 2 steps is limited. And so just being able to break those things down, like see how comfortably I did that without a script, right? I've had so much practice because one of my stepkids has a diagnosis. And I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to work with a coach, get in a program, and for all of the parental figures to have the same language at the same time, and for us to curate the kind of communication and description of that with his classroom teacher and with the administrators and the aftercare and the camp counselors. So everybody was using the same terms. He's not an ADHD kid. He is a child with ADHD. Just even that, for example, inattentive type, even just that little piece can go a really long way. Here are the interventions we're using right now. Here are the interventions we're not using. Criticizing and naming what they're doing wrong over and over and over again absolutely has been linked to lowered self-esteem and worsening symptoms in children with ADD and ADHD, for example, versus catching a kid being good and reinforcing every time you see them improving with their focus and improving with their impulsivity, improving with their physical self-control, et cetera, has been linked to progress. So understanding all of those nuances takes a team. Julie, if you don't have a team, reach out to mine. I have a great occupational therapist on board too, who I work with very closely in my coaching and my year-long program. She's one of the coaches in the Family Foundation's immersion. So excellent in helping guide also, the process of making sure that whatever school placement he has, whether it's now or into kindergarten, first grade, is going to meet his needs and meet it in spades. That's what we want for these kids. They're entitled to it now. There's even a federal law to back you up. So let us know if you don't have a team, if you'd like to chat more about how we can build one for you. All right, I have a few more questions. What a great set we've had so far. I've got one that is about younger children. And I like this one because I've never been asked it before. So here we go. This is from Rhonda. Rhonda says, my younger children think I'm too old and disrespect me because of it. What can I do to get their respect? This is such a valuable inquiry, just generally about when parents are not feeling respected and feel disrespected. And I think specifically around age, we have a lot to unpack here. So I'll say a few things. I have a lot to say. This could be an entire podcast episode for the Calm Empowered Parent. I could just see it. So Rhonda, if we ever do one, maybe we'll bring you on as one of our kind of panelists, just to share your experience with this. But what I can say is that as they get older, they will see more examples of different kinds of families and family structures. And what a lot of kids miss is how valuable people in elders are. And so finding other families within your immediate community where there's either intergenerational caregiving that might be, closer in age range to you or even older, like grandparents or grand aunts and uncles or older aunts and uncles, can be really helpful. So they can see that even though you may be older than what they're familiar with, you're not irrelevant, like you're valuable. And you want to find, obviously, positive examples in your community. And if you don't have that immediately, like put it out there, see if there are folks in your area, in your child's school or childcare, in your, in your immediate like connections and network, like ping people and saying, this kind of comes back to showing more than telling. Like telling a child to respect you, even at your age, is really different than showing them example after example after example of, well-functioning families where they, even the young kids look up to their elders, no matter what age they are. So that's one thing you can do. Another is you can get into the literature. There's one, not the literature. You can get in, bring in some children's literature. There's a story called Miss Tizzy. A beautiful story. There's an elder woman in the community, and the kids really enjoy all these things that she can do for them. And no, she's not like doing headstands and running a mile with them, or like running around on the soccer field with them. She's doing the things that she's physically able to at her age, which I don't even know if that's, a factor for you, but just as an example, she has value, and she's clearly in her elder years. And then when she gets sick, the whole community of kids kind of return all the kindness to her and take care of her in a way that's so touching, and the artwork is beautiful. So Miss Tizzy, that's a really nice read aloud for younger kids, where you want to help them understand the value of people who are in their midlife or older. The other thing I want to say about age is that in a lot of ways, it is just a construct. It's like 40 is the new 30, 50 is the new 40, 60 is the new 50 sort of thing. I feel like we are sort of our longevity is increasing over time as a species and as a culture. And I think that, oftentimes we still have these sort of storybook families that have to look a certain way, and that's along a lot of dimensions. And it's all the stories that are built up around aging, I think, are up for debate. I have two clients that one had her child when she was 54. Another client who has two beautiful boys and carried them at 50 and 52. I myself in my mid 40s am, moving towards an IVF as well. And so parents look different now. Like, when you can be a parent is like, it has this huge range now. So, but I want to get a little more granular with you now that I've spoken on the kind of the age topic, which is that when we feel disrespected by our kids, there's usually like some layers to that. And I want you to consider a little more specifically, like, what behaviors do you think are leading to your conclusion that they're disrespectful to you? Are they don't listen, they talk back, they don't pick up after themselves, they make fun of you, they name call? I mean, there's such a wide range of possibility there. But I want you to take an inventory of that and maybe pick the three that you dislike the most. And I would want you to take it on like a project. And if we were working together, for example, we would take 1, 2, or 3 of them on at a time at the most. And we would work really clearly with you and the kids around, like, why is this behavior happening? We want to get to the bottom of it. We want to be proactive and preventative as much as possible, doing things like taking time out for training and making sure they have all the kind of environment they need to be successful in paying attention or in cleaning up after themselves. They have the skills and they have the right setting. But then we would also, like, hit the ground running pretty hard with making sure that they understand why these expectations exist and how, like, what's required of them. And a lot of times that's quite a bit of structure and just shifting the way that you present that structure to the kids, and they respond to it. I have had kids in my care, for 20 years, but when I'm thinking about younger kids, preschool for 5 years, elementary for 10, where that there was an issue with kids disrespecting their parents. And as a matter of fact, I think it's the most common complaint I get across the board. And part of it is that we don't have a whole lot of guidance about how to establish the norms of respect without maybe resorting to things that we don't want to resort to, like really strict punishment or anger or fear, right? So it's like, okay, if we don't have that, maybe those are the ones we're familiar with, or maybe we don't have any roadmap because we didn't have any guidance when we were ourselves kids. Maybe we don't have experience with children. How do you come up with that, right? It's almost like there's like this void and we have to fill it with something. And there's so much information out there about how to approach it. There's like hand in hand, and then there's positive parenting, and then there's conscious parenting, and there's just like all these things. And they seem to keep coming back to, like, form a good relationship with your kid. And I say yes to that. Yes. Connect first, form a relationship with your kid. And they need structure from you. They crave it. They actually can't thrive without it. They need some structure. And that structure can look different for each family, but they absolutely need it. So what I would get curious about with you, Rhonda, and anyone else, is like, what does the structure need to be in order to establish expectations of what respect looks like in your family? And I'll tell you, it's variable. And that's where it gets confusing out there, because what I've seen is that people will say, okay, well, then I'll just download this checklist and I'll give it to my kids and they need to complete the checklist or to get a star, or else they don't get a star, and then we're done. That is structure, sure, but I worry about that because even though it works for a certain percentage of people, it won't work for the others. And what I worry about is that people will borrow those structures that were created, and then when they don't work, they don't have an idea, and now they feel even more deflated, right? Like there must be something wrong with me or my kid or the way I'm doing it, etc. And it can actually sometimes lead to more harm than good. And now the kid might even have a bad association with checklists, and now you've kind of ruined checklists for the family. And then you're kind of starting from like, we have to fix this instead of kind of from a nice clean slate. So what I like to suggest is that you create structures that are really clear, but also flexible and also very customized to your specific family and kids. So when I say, what does respect look like in your family? Let's say at meal times, your standard or your idea of what respect looks like there might look real. I would guarantee, actually, if we had 10 of you in a room and asked you to write down, what does it look like? What does respect look like? You'll have some things that overlap, but everybody will have at least one thing that doesn't. Like some people will say chewing with your mouth open. Others will say using the right utensils. Others will say staying at the table for 30 minutes. Others will say 20. Others will say 10. Others will say 5. People will say use a napkin. People will say don't, know how to use a cloth napkin versus a paper towel. I mean, there's like, we could just keep going. Feeds themselves versus being spoon fed. Always takes turns listening and talking. It's just, there's so many things there, and that's where we get overwhelmed. And so what I like to do is actually go through that. And I do this all the time with my clients. I say, okay, what does your version of respect at the dinner table look like? Like, let's map it out for you specifically. And that's where we're going to start with the kids. And then we'll make structure around that. And then we'll see if your best guess of like what it should look like is something that your family can rise to, or if you need to scaffold them there. When we talk about scaffolding, we say, like, let's break it down into stages. Maybe phase 1 is we tackle just the stay in your seat and for 10 minutes and clear the table. That's it. We're not going to address, items 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 yet. And then the next one, once they've got that down, then we're going to bring in 2 or 3 more items, and then 2 or 3 more items. And next thing you know, you've got kids staying at the table for 20 minutes, taking turns listening and speaking, remembering to clear their plate, et cetera, right? They've got many, many things that they've conquered, and you've done it together as a family. And now you have this template for maybe now talking about how do we deal with messes in the house, or what kind of language do we use as a family, right? How do we treat each other? How do we treat each other with respect? Specifically, what language is okay, what language isn't okay? Please don't try to do it all at once. Project by project, step by step. It works over time. But also I want you to know it can take 10 to 20 times before you get there. So imagine if you're trying 10 things at once and it takes 10 to 20 times, no wonder parents are overwhelmed and exhausted, right? It makes you want to give up and then just say they're being difficult, and then say that's it. Right? And then, the stress continues, and doesn't have to be that way. You can smooth out things. You can cut it in half, and then in half, and then half again. The number of conflicts, episodes, stressful meals, stressful moments, stressful routines, moments of disrespect. You can keep improving it over time. And that's why my favorite format for working with families is a year long or more. Some of my folks, like half of my families, have been in my program for 2 or in their second, third, fourth, or even 5th year, because they see the progress, and it's not because they didn't get enough out of it, it's because they're seeing the momentum and they don't want it to stop. They want to keep going and keep improving and make it something that's just like muscle memory, that they're going to customize, create structure, and roll it out to the kids, attune to the kids, stay with it, scaffold where needed, and then see the progress and build off that progress. It's really rewarding once you get it rolling. So that's what's available to you around this topic of disrespect. And so tying it back to age, I would say, what is it specifically that signals to you that they're not being respectful of your age? And I would be targeting that first, right? In like the first phase of what you're working on as a family. Okay. Next question. I find it difficult to be as present, patient, and positive as I would like to be with my 8-year-old. What can I do to improve on that? And this is a good general question. I like it because what I want to say is first, like, get to know what 8-year-olds are and are not, what they can and can't do. Like, what is their developmental goal right now? What are they up to? How is their identity shifting into the 9 to 12? Understand their goals. And one of the best ways to do that is to really get to know their preferences, connecting before correcting, having listening sessions with them where you make one-on-one time where it's just quality time. Either you're doing an activity mutually or you're not, and you're just hanging out. So finding windows during the day-to-day life where you can drop in with them. And one thing that gets in the way of that for parents, which might be true for Michael, who asked this question, is thinking that it needs to be a big gesture for it to work. What we know now from, like, let's say James Clear's Atomic Habits and other, folks, researchers who've been around even longer than James Clear, is that small efforts over time actually add up to more than big gestures all at once. So yes, like, plan your daughter daddy day, for example, once every season, and have that, but don't expect that to carry you all the way through the season. What I would rather have you do is find 2 to 20 minutes on the regular where you really drop in with them. And I want you to know, though, that that doesn't mean that you put your entire adult agenda, your entire adult personality, and all of your everything, like, to the side and not be yourself. I've seen parents overdo this too. So what being present means, you're present with them, but you're also not abandoning yourself. You're present with yourself. And so sometimes what it looks like is it's back and forth sharing. And you do insert yourself in the conversation and say, what I think about that is this, or can I tell you a story from my day too? And it's a there's mutuality there in being present. Being present isn't always just sort of sitting there like an open vessel, letting them pour into you. Okay. Or like just a witness only. But, a little back and forth of just observe, don't react, and then interact, and then observe again, and then interact and observe again, and just have a nice little rhythm that they can rely on when they spend time with you. Another thing I would say is find mutual activities that are reliable and maybe special to just your bond. Like, I have a mom who swings her daughter around like this, and she loves it. And so it's just a mommy thing. And they do this, and she's young, she's only 3, and we'll do this. With a 8-year-old, it might be going to the comic book store and, or to the library and going to the manga section and looking for that next issue and reading some of it together. And you do that once a week. Maybe it's working on a project where you're building something and you just do one step at a time, right? You come back to it and you keep it going and you save it. Maybe you're reading a chapter book out loud to them and you get to the next chapter, right? Things that are ongoing are also really helpful. With 8-year-olds, they especially like that. So that's one of my tips. Another could be that if patience is hard for you, or being as positive as possible, is that maybe, as a family, you could double down on self-care practices, making sure that you actually have capacity and you have a reserve and you're doing everything you can to manage stress in small, actionable ways, 2 to 20 minutes, right? Just making sure you're drinking a water and taking a few deep breaths even, and doing double of what you're doing right now and seeing if that just naturally gives you more capacity. With my clients, we're always talking about what are we doing to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, like, so that our tank isn't empty when we reach our kids, because then we're not going to even be able to access all these good ideas that we want to, these tools and strategies and best intentions, but it's like, you can't access them because you don't have capacity to pause and self-regulate. It's going to be really hard. One last story on that. I have a client who just renewed for a second year, and she goes, in the first year, I didn't really feel like I could fully utilize and really go for those routines and limits pieces and get really collaborative with my kid, because I was just constantly being triggered by him. And I wasn't able to even just keep a baseline of expectations. I would eventually give in, he'd kind of wear me down, and then it would create this vicious cycle. She's like, in the first year, I broke that cycle. I don't get upset like I used to. I stay calm. We worked on that together, and I just tell him things matter-of-factly. I don't give in and do a long negotiation. I give him some time to cope and to come back around, and he does. And then we move on. And she said, I don't feel like I'm done though. I feel like I've finally set the groundwork. for what's possible next. And I think with an 8-year-old, sky is the limit for how much you can collaborate together. And when you get really synced up with an 8-year-old, you won't even be thinking about how positive, present, and patient you are. You'll be more excited about like, what projects can we get done together? How can we, optimize? How can we run our little family society together, side by side? All these life skills that will help them as they head into the changes ahead with their tween and teen years. So a lot there for you, Michael. Hope that you find it supportive. Let us know how that all goes. And then last but not least, I have one last question. Let me just put it here in the chat. Okay. Eterna asks, it's very difficult to get affection from Eterna's 13-year-old daughter. Is there anything I can do to help her be more affectionate? So when we think about affection, when it's genuine, it comes from a place of ease and connection. It also comes from potentially a preference for certain kinds of what we have coined love languages, right? And I wonder if you have possibly had a little blind spot for how affection is already flowing, because maybe one of the love languages that she expresses her love through isn't one that you recognize very easily. That happened to me with my stepfather, for example. No words of affection, no physical touch. Very little quality time, and definitely gifts were a struggle for him. But this man loves me a mountain, and I didn't know it until I learned about acts of service being equated to all those other love languages. Then I looked back, and I was kind of blown away, actually moved to tears, thinking about how he had showed up for me, all those rides, all those ways that he had prepared, like, the house so that it would be, comfortable and easy and safe and enjoyable to be there. All those times he, kind of did his honey-do lists for both me and my mom. And even to this day, he shows up with acts of service, and to not just me, but I'm watching him, travel around the country, helping all of his nieces and nephews with projects, because that's his main love language. And I do wonder with your 13-year-old daughter if maybe you just haven't quite synced up yet on your love language. I also wonder if there are conflicts or tensions that need to be cleared to create more ease between the two of you. With teens, they can hold a grudge, and if there's something unresolved, they will withhold affection. So we want to get curious about if there's a root cause to them withholding affection that has to do with something unresolved between the two of you. Sometimes it can be helpful to lay the groundwork for a venting session where they just get to complain about anything they want. It doesn't even have to be about you. Just complain, and you're just going to listen. You're like, lay it on me, babe. I want to hear it all. Tell me everything that's bothering you. And you're not allowed to respond with anything besides, I'm so glad you shared that with me. Thank you. Is there anything else? It can kind of clear things up and clean things up. And maybe there has been something underneath it all, and she might lose it because she's been holding on to something and it's been intense inside of her, and the tension can come out with like some pretty strong language sometimes, like you always, or you never, or you're the worst, or the bad, this person is so much better. Accusations, judgments, whatever, but like allowing that to flow, if that hasn't been something that you've really opened and released between the two of you, that can be really cathartic. And I've seen that have effects with kids even as young as 9, 10. So that's something to explore. And then last but not least, rituals, like things that you insist on, and it's not negotiable. Something we would do is we'd have meals. That's the classic one, family dinners, like 4 nights a week with both kids. No, non-negotiable. And they knew it. And even if they would drag themselves there, they would settle in. And then about 15 minutes in, we would be able to have a decent conversation and actually connect. And this was with our 10, 11, 12-year-olds at that time. And then his older sister was 3, 4 years older. So in that same age range, we just insisted on these rituals of connection. And we made it low pressure in terms of how they showed up, but they at least needed to be physically present. So there's that. And then, the whole idea of connecting before correcting, where you get into their world first. So the venting, the regular rhythm of having, something that's a ritual of connection. love languages can help, but there's also just this general like curiosity of genuine curiosity of putting attention and focus on whatever they're putting their focus and attention on, whether it's their sport, it's their friends, it's their love interest, it's the show, it's this influencer, it's the hair and makeup, it's the outfits, it's maybe they're just randomly obsessed with a culture. Like my son had a Korea phase. Like he was just so into everything Korean. I think it was K-pop was going on and was interested in learning Korean. Like, okay, like going with those interests, because there's nothing worse than hearing from a teen, you don't get it. And that is definitely tied to having less affection. The other thing you always want to watch out for is their fragile ego. Like, are there ways that either directly or indirectly, they feel like in your presence, they're going to be corrected, criticized, even condescended towards, or belittled or lectured in some way? Really got to rein that in and maybe do a little audit on your own approach to communicating with them. Teens need to be seen, felt, and heard before they will see, feel, and hear you, more than at any other age. They are so about themselves. It's like 90-10, 90% about them, 10% about you. That's about how much space they have. It's not going to be 50-50, by the way. It's just not developmentally usually within reach. They have to be focusing on themselves to be developing their sense of identity and place in the world and purpose. And they're so overwhelmed. They have a lot going on internally and externally. So take the smaller wins when you get them. And I would maybe even end up reframing, what does affection mean and look like? Like, if you're thinking, oh, that would mean we'd snuggle regularly. We would regularly have like mother-daughter dates. We would spend hours together talking about things. She'd be my buddy. We'd be kind of besties. That's the exception, not the norm. I'm telling you right now. Maybe for like once a month, but not every day. That's like a huge exception. The norm is much different. So maybe that's helped you, Eterna. I hope that we've supported you with your question. As we're closing this Ask Vanessa Anything, I just want to acknowledge that we have a really diverse but really engaged community, and I really appreciate that. And as I mentioned in many of the Ask Vanessa Anything responses where I coach y'all, it is about a nuanced approach. And so I just want to normalize that if you're out there looking at general resources and gleaning some things, but feel like it's not quite answering your questions, don't be discouraged. By design, that advice can often be too general as a kind of a starting place, a foundation to kind of get a sense of what is your overall philosophy and approach. And it's useful for that. It can also be very method-based, where there's, I always say methods sell books. Because if you can name it and it's interesting, it's something to consider, and it might be one of the methods that you borrow from as you really find your own authentic way of how you're going to raise your kids. But I take a bold stand for each family being able to customize and at your own pace, develop your authentic parenting style and your version of what support and structure looks like in your family, what your routines, your conflict resolution process, your connections, your like rituals of, daily life. That's really up to you. And it should feel real and right to you as it evolves alongside your kids. And I'm here for that. So thank you for listening and being a part of the community. And, drop some, let me know, give me some love on the comments and the chat. And, feel free to like and put the hearts on and everything. Let me know if you need anything else. If you have a question, we can queue up for a future Ask Vanessa Anything. We're here for you. And some of you might be interested in checking out like a more involved and more rich and enriching experience, and be sure to indicate that that's you as we will be ramping up into our next cohort over the next coming months. We like to know who wants to chat with us about that, so we can get you some early access to some really great resources before the next cohort starts in January. All right, lots of love to everybody, and stay tuned for season 2 of the podcast as well. Until next time. Bye for now. You're welcome, Gianni. He says, thank you, Vanessa. Alex says, building structure was extremely helpful, Vanessa. His daughter is really interested in creating checklists, so we'll do this together. Alex says, can't wait. Awesome. Alex says, as always, I learned so much and I'm able to implement your guidance. Great, Alex. So good to hear comments from folks who are here. I appreciate you for taking the time to type that out. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.